Hi, my name is Mark Copeman and welcome to another edition of Solopreneur Secrets, where today I'm going to focus on the topic of motivation. If you're a freelancer, if you're a contractor, if you're a consultant, how do you keep getting out of bed every day, particularly when things get tough? How do you do it? Well, I've got some ideas. I've been doing this for a good few years myself. If you're interested, keep watching. So for me, one of the keys to remaining motivated, I think, is always knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Because when times get tough, when you have bad days, you have bad weeks, you have bad months, you have to keep cemented in remembering why you're doing what you're doing. If you have recently left perhaps a stable corporate job and you have decided to go it alone, there will be times, it's inevitable, where you just start to think, did I do the right thing? And that's just a natural feeling. It really is. You have to remember, though, if you had have stayed, A, how would you have been feeling? Perhaps miserable. And B, you are not in control of your own destiny. If you're working for someone else, particularly a large organization, that organization can come along at any particular moment and say, do you know what? We are done with your services. When you work for yourself, when you're a solopreneur, a contractor, a freelancer, whatever it may be, you are in control of your own destiny. And so you have to keep those motivation levels high in order for you to succeed. And if you continuously remember why you're doing what you're doing, that is a great help. And on my notice board, just to my right hand side, I have a number of pieces of paper with all sorts of bits of writing on, which remind me why I do what I do each day. One of those pieces of paper is a little vision statement. It's not grand, but it talks about in a few years' time. There's a very specific date in just under 5 years' time, as I record this today, which reminds me of the sort of lifestyle that I want to be living. Okay, it's not about money, but what it is about, my particular vision, is about having some freedom to be able to choose to do the sorts of things that myself and my wife want to do. And that is my little reminder. So when I do have a bad day, when I do have a bad week, it's in my mind's eye all the time. And I just remember why I wrote that in the first place, why it was important to me when I wrote it. And the fact is, it's still important to me today. And so, if I am having a bad day, I have to accept that and I have to move on. But the next day, I'm going to start again. And I'm going to remind myself of just how important that little vision is for me. I often talk about building a balance sheet, and you'll hear me talk about this on this channel quite frequently. And this is another motivational tip for me, because you can spend hours, days, even weeks as a freelancer, as a consultant, building stuff which actually, on a day-to-day point of view, doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It doesn't seem to be achieving anything. And it's very, very easy for those motivation levels to fall when that's the case. You might have recorded a dozen videos. You might have written a book. You might have written some blog posts, whatever it may be, and it's not getting any traction. And that, guess what, can make you feel pretty low and pretty fed up. It's understandable, and it happens all the time. But for me, if you consider building that balance sheet, this is something you're going to come back to every day, every week, every month for a number of years, and you're going to be consistent in what you're doing, then you will start to see results. It's inevitable. Now, it may not be the results you're expecting. You may have to pivot a little bit. You may have to change what you're doing and what you're getting up to, but you will start to see results. And so when you have a bad day, when you're losing that little bit of motivation, and you're thinking, I'm putting out all this stuff, but actually there's very little coming back, think about the balance sheet that you're building, because every single piece of content that you build, every single interaction you have with somebody else, every single client meeting that you may have, even if it goes nowhere, you are still building the balance sheet. And it could be the content balance sheet, it could be the product balance sheet, it could be a relationship balance sheet. It doesn't matter what it is, but all of those interactions you're having, you're building a balance sheet. And if you remember back to that when you're having that bad day and you need that little bit of motivation, remember that those times and that effort is not wasted, it's just going into the balance sheet. One of the most inspiring phrases that I picked up probably about 13, 14 years ago now from a fantastic book by somebody I admire hugely, Jason Fried from Basecamp. And you'll hear me talking about him on this channel. There's so much that I've learned from him. He wrote a book called Getting Real, which describes how to create a software business. It's a series of lessons that they learnt in the very early days of creating Basecamp, which is a pretty successful project management tool if you've never come across it. One of the chapters inside that book is simply called Embrace Your Constraints. And quite often when you're starting out as a solopreneur or even along the journey, it's very, very easy to think that you can do everything. And it's also very easy to be disappointed and with yourself and with the situation around you because you've set your expectations too high. Embracing your constraints is a fantastic way of, again, keeping those motivation levels high. If you set yourself a whole bunch of goals, however you choose to do that, and there's another video on that topic along the way, then you have to make those goals realistic. If you start to create goals of, I'm going to achieve this much revenue and this many clients and all the rest of it, you are setting yourself up to fail because those things are not in your control. Okay. You cannot say that you are going to create X worth of revenue over the period of 12 months or 3 months or whatever it is, because you don't know if that's possible. There's some alternatives to that sort of objective, and that is to make 10 phone calls or to send 10 emails each day or whatever it may be. Those sorts of things are in your control. But to say you're going to suddenly strive for a certain amount of revenue is impossible. And if you set yourself up like that with a set of objectives, then you will start to lose motivation because you will realize quite quickly that you're not getting close to that particular objective because guess what? It's not in your control. So think about ways of setting goals which embrace your constraints. You only have so much time and money and resources and energy available. Working 20-hour days is not the answer. So be realistic with the constraints that you put on yourself and your business. And that way, you will ensure that the objectives you set for yourself, they may be stretching, but they are within certain bounds, which means that your motivation levels will remain high.